Welcome to Free Thought Matters. I'm Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom From Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate and to educate the public about the views of non-believers. For more information on FFRF and our activities, go to our webpage at ffrf.us. Today's show features the erudite constitutional attorney David J. Kalyonides, who's the lead litigator in FFRF's significant court challenge of prayer and religious ritual by a California school board. David Kalyonides has been practicing law for over 25 years and has litigated more than 300 federal cases. He was interviewed on site in San Francisco at FFRF's annual convention by FFRF Legal Director Rebecca Markert and FFRF Director of Strategic Response, Andrew Seidel.
David, your first case with the Freedom From Religion Foundation was against Chino Valley Unified School District. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that?
Sure. So actually, Andrew had contacted me. We played phone tag for a little bit on that, and I recall that I was leaving a local jail after visiting a client, and actually we connected on the phone. And Andrew brought up the issue of Chino Valley Unified School District. I explained my boys were in school in that district. I was familiar with the district, had some issues with the district already.
You'd tangled with them in the past.
I had tangled with them in the past on some issues. Yes, my boys have been protesting the pledge since 5th grade. They are now in 11th grade. And then we had a more substantive conversation about some of the specific issues. I'd never actually been to any of the board meetings where all these violations were occurring. But then I started looking at some of the video clips, and that's actually how we initiated the process. And it wasn't very long after that, maybe a month or two, that we actually filed the complaint, I believe. So it happened very quickly.
And we talk about it as a prayer case, but it was so much worse than that.
Yeah, and the media calls it the prayer case. Even the plaintiffs, our individual plaintiffs who are residents, and I bump into them regularly, call it the prayer case, but it's not. I mean, the board members were actively telling the audience to go find Jesus, proselytizing all the time. Every meeting, one of them would read from the Bible.
What is the gospel?
Mostly New Testament or Psalms. Those were the two areas. But even beyond that, some of the more egregious comments, the more outrageous comments, were these religious commentaries that they would make about political or social issues of the day. Some of the comments right when the Obergefell, the marriage equality case came down, they were making all sorts of outrageous statements. We have a reasonably sizable LGBT community in the district. Many of my boys' friends come from same-sex parents, and for the board to do that, that's the sort of thing that really started getting more of the public involved in these issues.
And part of the problem here is we have this school board that's kind of been captured by the local megachurch, and they're deliberately pushing these Dominionist candidates to go in and take over the school board and get them to change. And they passed a statement on gay marriage.
Right.
It's literally nothing to do with the schools at all.
No, and so this fella, Jack Hibbs, who is the head of Calvary Chapel of Chino Hills, that Christian Taliban church, he's not even from the community. He and his wife came to the community, and I don't know how long ago, but it was quite a while ago, for the purpose of setting up their type of church, part of the Calvary Chapel church system. Had no contact with the community before that. So this is not somebody who came, moved to the community, liked it, decided he wanted to start a church, or was raised in the community and thought that the community needed. No, this is somebody who targeted this community. And he is extremely, in his organization, they're affiliated with a lot of the extreme Christian groups in the nation. They have a very well-funded and strategic approach by getting their leaders from their church to run for these low-level public offices, because no one pays attention to the school board election or your your fire district, whatever they do. And that's how they start to take over local government. Now we have 2 of the current board are from Jack Hibbs's church. And I think there are 2 or 3 in the local city councils who are also from that church. So they're just spreading out.
So what's interesting for this case is that we filed originally with about 4 plaintiffs, and then we had to file an amendment because we got over 20 people who are interested in being plaintiffs in this case. So it sounds like even though they are infiltrating the school board and the city council, it sounds like there's a lot of community outcry and that residents are not accepting this. Would you say that's true?
I think so. And it was, surprising but refreshing when we went from the original plaintiffs to the total 22, not including FFRF. So we actually have 23 plaintiffs, including the organization. And to listen to these people, many of them, the majority, were not just religiously unaffiliated. These were express out there atheists in the community who just never thought that they would have to be dealing with this sort of thing. One of our named plaintiffs was actually a Christian individual who just was outraged by this. This was not how he viewed his faith.
Yeah. Well, Jesus condemns public prayer in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6:5. It's hypocrisy.
I know, and the idea of this, but
I wanted to, let's touch one more second on this, because the demographics are important, and it's one of the reasons I think that we got such a powerful response to our case. Yeah. And at the recent FFRF convention in San Francisco in 2018, you talked about that a little bit. So let's just take a look at that clip real quick.
Okay. Here's where the coming storm is. What the religious right is doing, what the dominionists are doing, what the Christian Taliban is doing is something that I think we need to be focused on, because we're not. We're looking at federal Congress, we're looking at our federal elected officials, and maybe even our state officials. They're going for local government. That's where the battle is. Because those people then move up in their political career. And what's the one thing nobody really pays attention to on their ballot? Oh, the school board. It's the school board. Is it a teacher? Does it sound like a teacher? Do they all say they love students? Vote them in. Well, they do vote them in. And Chino Valley is in a heated political battle with parents who are behind the time, who have not organized, but they're now fighting back. And that's where the battle is. And now what the religious right is doing is trying to get out of the Establishment Clause and calling this a matter of free speech. The demographics are very interesting because I think, as I mentioned at the convention, the district actually has a higher percentage of unaffiliated religious people than the average in the state of California. Little fact, according to the Pew Research Center, California has 20% nuns. Us nuns, not the other nuns. 1 to 2% of the population are Jewish, 1 to 2% of the population are Muslim, 1 to 2% are Buddhist, and 1 to 2% are Hindu. Chino Valley is different. The nuns are around 40%. Buddhists are around 10%, Hindus maybe around 5%, Muslims, I'm not really sure. Interestingly, Mormons are about 5% in that district too, but only Christian pastors were invited to come and give the invocation. The district actually has a higher percentage of unaffiliated religious people than the average in the state of California. And you would think, by how active the church is and the extreme Christian Taliban types are, you'd think that they were a majority in the community. Not only had the fact of our plaintiffs shown that, but now there is more community outrage. A lot of that also has been garnered by when we won the case, when Judge Bernal from the U.S. District Court granted our motion for summary judgment, granted our attorney's fees. That really pissed off the community because they're now looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money that has to be paid. Of course, the board then appealed, and then when the Ninth Circuit came, And I really describe that opinion as slamming the board. They were just right on the money on every issue, coming down to protecting children from this kind of coercive activity. So,
and that's exactly what it comes down to. I mean, that's the center of this case. We have people abusing their government office to impose their religion on other people's kids.
Well, right, and it's taking the most vulnerable in the community and the most unrepresented in the community. So, huge victory on that end, and hopefully we'll be able to continue. I mean, who knows how
we definitely will be. And we're going to come back and talk about some of the other cases that David Kalyonides has done with us in just a minute.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
And we're back with Free Thought Matters. I'm Andrew Seidel, Director of Strategic Response at FFRF, with our legal director, Rebecca Markert. And we're talking with David Kalyonides, who is our attorney in Chino Valley and other cases in California. You've knocked a few out of the park for us.
A little bit. I mean, I think the Chino Valley would be really a home run because I think the other two, they forfeited a little bit. I mean, well, or they laid down their king early on in the game. So we had, I think our next case together was Antelope Valley School District.
I think that's right.
And that was a fun case, although it was very short-lived.
Super short, but it was an interesting one. You got discrimination against non-believers.
Yes, so that was where the Antelope Valley Freethinkers, the organization, I believe it was there may only be one school in Antelope Valley. It's not a large community. But I believe it was the high school had this annual scholarship or essay writing contest that would allow various organizations to promote some essay ideas. And the Antelope Valley Freethinkers wanted to submit a scholarship and be part of that. But the essays had to be secular. And I can't remember the specific topic, but it had to be something about why being secular was important in a student's life.
I think there was something in there about there was a prompt about standing up, not refusing to stand for the pledge, like your kids do.
It may have been that too, something like that. And the principal said they wouldn't pass it out and wouldn't allow them to participate in the scholarship for the students. And my recollection was this happened late in the year, around April. Mm-hmm. And they basically told Andrew, after his nice letter, to go pound sand. So we filed a lawsuit, and I think within a week of being served, because it was very easy to serve them, within a week, we got a call from like their county council or whatever. There is a private law firm, but handled all their cases. Literally in the first conversation, how do we make this go away? They knew those guys were so off.
So nice when that happened.
It's nice to deal with real thinking lawyers as opposed to these religious lawyers who have an agenda, sometimes driving the clients, which I think is really a problem, particularly when you have a school board and you don't have unanimity. Here, it was a principal and maybe an administration of the school, and then some rational lawyers who basically said, anything you want. But as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, we got our modest attorney's fees. We got an agreement that they could not discriminate against Antelope Valley Freethinkers, but because it was so late in the year that the school itself had to mail out the request for the competition, the essay competition, which I thought was sweet justice right there. And then that issue came back, I think, later, but nothing ever came of it.
Yeah, we said, hey, remember that time we sued you? And they fixed it.
And they fixed it. Very good. Always nice, right? And then the next The next case was the Santa Clara Cross case.
That's right. And I had been working on that case since 2012. When
It's like your white whale.
Right. So, and I had written to the city about it, and they had agreed to remove it. But then it took them like 3 or 4 years, and finally I stopped believing that they were actually going to remove it. And I called you up and I said, we need to sue them because I think that will light the fire that gets them to remove it.
Right.
And they did. It didn't take, it wasn't as quick as Antelope Valley, but it was pretty quick.
It was, and again, dealing with a very competent private counsel who was representing the city, very smart, easy to deal with litigator in San Francisco. He realized there may be issues, but it wasn't worth fighting over. He understood there was the agreement. It was going to be a lot more cost effective. And I think they needed to finalize where the cross was going to be moved to because they didn't want to destroy it. And we weren't asking for it to be destroyed. We just take it off public property.
That's all you have
and
to do.
They love to spin it. They're trying to destroy and rewrite history. No, put it in its proper place. Put it in a museum. But anyway, the point is, there was some issue with the timing of moving because of some contracts they had to get finalized. Plus, the city council only met once a month, and so every time we had a new draft of the settlement, it had to go to them, and so there was delay. But I think we wrapped it up in 4 or 5 months.
Right. And it was a huge cross. And for them to actually remove it off of this public park property was huge for FFRF. Usually what happens is they'll do some sort of land transfer or kind of dispose of the property in some way. So this was a great victory for us, and we were grateful for your work on that case.
And it was fun. It was interesting, and it's always nice to deal with lawyers who want to try to resolve the issue.
Yes. So 3 for 3 with FFRF cases.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're not winning and upholding the First Amendment of the Constitution?
In my First Amendment cases, I'm actually 4 for 4.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Before you guys got me, I did some work with American Humanists, and we
This is like Lake Elsinore.
This was the Lake Elsinore Veterans Memorial, which we actually went to trial on, and in the Central District of California, and won that one. So I'm 4 for 4. What I do on my free time? No, my real job, criminal defense, federal criminal defense primarily, and then in the winter months I teach skiing at Big Bear Mountain Resorts.
So 1 trial for AHA. How many trials have you done in your career, would you guess?
Pushing 50, mostly federal trials, mostly criminal.
All right.
Yeah.
Some good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's some deep experience.
Yeah, and because of the federal matters, they're usually lengthy trials. So I think the shortest federal trial I ever had, a felony federal trial, was 1 week. That was the shortest I've ever had.
But it's way more fun doing First Amendment stuff with FFRF.
It really is.
It is.
One, you get to win. I mean, come on. I mean, the statistics are against you in criminal defense, but we still fight, and it's important. And the Establishment Clause issues come up in the criminal context because we do have cases where probation or some type of punishment, they want to involve some sort of religious aspect. And you're seeing particularly state judges who are ordering going to some sort of study or this sort of thing. I actually had Judge Bernal on a matter.
Chino Valley judge.
Chino Valley judge, where the issue was they wanted, probation wanted my client to go to AA. And I brought up the statistics about how it's very religious based and it's unfair and that we weren't opposing some sort of therapy.
Terrible recidivism rates too.
Yes.
AA. Yeah.
And Judge Bernal agreed. He said, I'm not going to order AA, but some kind of ongoing outpatient therapy.
Yeah, and this is a big problem that FFRF deals with. We get complaints about this all the time.
Right. We get a lot of complaints, and we're actually focusing on the drug courts in Michigan because they are making people go to AA, even though the defendants are saying, I actually found a different program that I would like to do, and it is similar, but it's secular.
Right.
And they're still being forced to go to AA.
Right. And sometimes it's just ignorance by the judges not realizing the religious aspect of AA and NA. Other times there is a religious bent of the judge. I haven't yet, but I've wanted to, raise the issue with our district courts that still make witnesses, swear
on the Bible.
not on the Bible, but so help you God.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, we have one judge who we all have to stand, face the flag, which is the emblem of our Constitution, and he's the only one that does this, God-given rights.
We can write a letter for you.
Yeah, Judge Manny Reel, who's been on the bench 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah, time for him to
Yeah, it might be.
maybe move on to quieter times. But anyway, so we have these issues all over the place.
The thing that's striking to me about all the cases that we've been talking about, and especially it really is emphasized in Chino, which has gone from before all those cases to after all those cases and still ongoing, is that it's just the division that religion causes when it gets into our government. And that's like a whole reason behind the First Amendment in the first place is we don't want that divisiveness that religion brings in a government that belongs to we, the people, all the people.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it frustrates me that we have this romanticized view of the Pilgrims coming over, who, of course, were not the first ones to come to the New World, but the idea that they were seeking religious freedom. They weren't, because they weren't being oppressed. They were oppressing, and the fact that they weren't allowed to oppress, they found oppressive. So they come here to set up their little,
Theocracies.
So there's a problem there, and but the other thing is what also people don't realize is the early, what we would call evangelical Southern Baptists today, the Anabaptists, back in the time of the colonies and the Revolution, were vehemently opposed to any involvement in government because they saw what happened with the Church of England. That when you do have government involvement in church, it kills the true spirituality or whatever it is of the faith, and so they were very concerned about keeping. They were some of the biggest proponents of the First Amendment. How times have changed.
Now, personally, you sound a lot like a freethinker to me.
I'm what Penn Jillette would call a hardcore atheist, right? I don't even believe they believe. And I've dabbled in all sorts of different spiritual systems and was at one time an evangelical, which was actually good for me because I'm obsessive. So anything I'm interested in, I dig deeply. And so I was studying the Old Testament, the New Testament in Greek.
You can't be doing that if you want to keep the faith.
I know, you can't. I mean, I almost followed Bart Ehrman's path, right? Was heading towards seminary and this sort of thing. And the more you read, the more you know. Who was it who said that reading the Bible is the best conceived way towards atheism ever developed by man? I mean, if you just...
Isaac Asimov.
It was Isaac Asimov. Just reading it critically. I mean, from a historical kind of human perspective, it's actually a fascinating book. The theology is fascinating, just like I find Norse mythology or Greek mythology fascinating. And you can learn things from it. But come on, does Loki kill Thor? Does Thor kill Loki? Let's have a war over it? No. Right? Although we should actually, teach Norse because our days of our week are based on Norse mythology. Mm-hmm. But again, Santa Claus. I don't really have a problem with Santa Claus because, nobody wants to kill you over...
In the name of Santa Claus.
In the name of Santa Claus.
Yeah, no, we have a war on Christmas, though.
We do. We have a war on Christmas. And quite frankly, the war on Christmas that we have is the commercialization of Christmas that they want. So there's the war. Yeah, and that's going to start, every year we have that same battle. And
Oh yeah, no, I mean it gets earlier and earlier every year. We gear up for it in about August.
Yeah.
Usually. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we're ready. We're ready.
you're ready. Getting ready.
So I have one more personal question. How are you raising your children? Are they free thinkers as well?
Yes. So when they were little, out of respect for my mother-in-law, who was raised Catholic, but she's an atheist who doesn't know it. And it was really funny when her daughter came out. It was an accident when her daughter said, we atheists, and she stopped. It was really funny. This isn't my wife, this is her younger sister. And my wife has gone from being a weak Catholic to just a spiritual person. At one time we called her a druid because she believed in, the life force of the planet. Everything is the planet.
The Star Wars religion.
Yes,
Jedi
really
kind of
the
thing.
Force. Yeah,
Okay,
she has
yeah.
the Force. Be careful. And no, she is a free-thinking non-believer, but she's one of those atheists who it's more matter of fact about. I've got more important things to think about. Human interactions and relationships and dealing with that, whereas I'm much more almost militant at times. So the boys, they were exposed to Judaism because my background is from Eastern European Jewry, the Holocaust, so they learned a lot about that. They learned about Christianity from a kind of cultural perspective. We always did the Christmas thing. We did, for a time, just simply call it Newtonmas. We did have Saturnalia. We would have actually celebrated Ramadan if it was gift-giving. So that really was the motive behind it. So we answered their questions. One day, one of them came to me and asked if he should read the Bible. And I said, absolutely. You got to know this material and know this information. My wife was a good Catholic, never read the Bible. Right, and so it was never really a decision of we have to make sure that we raise the boys a certain way. It was we wanted to expose them and answer their questions truthfully, but they saw how we were about it, and they saw the nonsense. And
So the goal is not to indoctrinate or anything. It's just think for yourself, think freely. And,
right, we don't have busts of Christopher Hitchens in our in our house.
And that's exactly the way our public schools ought to work, as it turns out, which brings us full circle to the Chino Valley case, which we're going to take more, I think, with you. Rebecca and I really enjoy working with you. We got to do a big thank you to David.
It's a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
We've learned a lot.
I have too, and we've got to keep going. This is good work. This is good work.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Free Thought Matters. Thank you for joining us, because free thought matters.